Hello everybody and welcome to our business summit, and thank you so much for joining us. Before we officially start, I'd like to mention that we are recording this Zoom meeting so that we can make it available on our website for those who can't make this afternoon. But we are so pleased to welcome over 70 of you to this meeting so far. So I'd like to formally welcome everyone to the summit, and it is just so reassuring to know all of you, all of us who are here today are working together to meet the unprecedented challenge which COVID-19 has posed and continues to pose, not just for our health, but also to the economic health of our businesses, our region, and our country. The range of talents, experience, and knowledge that each and every one of you will bring to our discussions, both today and moving forward, is exceptional. And it will play a key part in helping us combat the economic effects of the virus as effectively as possible. Before we start the business of the day, I'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all of you here for the work that you've already done for our business and wider community during this crisis. All three of our local authorities have worked tirelessly to deliver the extra funding, grants and support while still maintaining fantastic levels of business support that they provide in normal times. Their response has been nothing short of remarkable, particularly when put in context that they've had to continue as much as possible their day-to-day business. And I know that their response has been hugely appreciated across the business community. We are really blessed that we have 3 business boards who work across the Marches, and they have helped shape our local response in their areas through their work with their members to provide detailed evidence of the impact of the virus across all sectors of business. It's these first-hand accounts of what life is really like at the coalface that will provide the data and the evidence that we need as we consider and shape our strategy for recovery. Our 2 chambers of commerce have risen superbly to the challenge of supporting not just their members, but the wider business community by providing a huge range of online information, webinars, advice sessions, and networking meetings. And in doing so, they have helped maintain morale across our region, and they played a vital role in bringing people together to share experiences and knowledge. Likewise, that is true of other business representative groups who are represented today, particularly the Federation of Small Businesses. The role they play in campaigning for, supporting and helping their members and feeding their stories into our discussions is absolutely invaluable. Such groups are the lifeblood of our business community, and we as the Marches Local Enterprise Partnership are proud to work alongside them. There are many more groups I could name whose work to help all our communities has proved exceptional, such as our universities, our training centres, our further education providers and our third sector partners, and the brilliant National Farmers Union who do so much to represent our farming community. And if I've missed any organisation off this list, my apologies, but rest assured, all of your efforts to support our business base could not be more appreciated. And I also need to pay tribute to the work of my colleagues within the LEP, both its board members and its staff. I have seen at first hand some of the work carried out by the Marches Growth Hub, by the Enterprise Zone at Skylon Park in Hereford, and by the individual board members of the LEP. And I can only say how proud I am to chair such an organisation which is doing so much across our region to help meet to help solve the crisis, or not solve, but to work through the crisis. I also need to say thank you to Be Bold PR, who have put together this session and have done so very, very quickly. But I don't think it is any exaggeration to say that COVID-19 is posing the greatest challenge that our business world has ever known in peacetime. This week's new restrictions are another body blow to many, many businesses who, through absolutely no fault of their own, have found their revenue cut off and their business models maybe even being made redundant. Today's summit is very much about the process of starting to develop a strategy for the future, to start drawing up plans which will help maintain the entrepreneurial spirit, which is so vital for our region, which is famous for its high volume of successful startups and our SMEs. to start developing strategies which will address the key priorities across the range of sectors that drive our regional economy. If we know one thing about our future, regardless of COVID-19, it is this: wealth does not simply create itself. It is an army of entrepreneurs, of small businesses, bigger companies, and the multinationals who create the money which ultimately drives our economy and benefits us all. But they don't work in a vacuum. They need the right infrastructure in place to thrive. They need the highly skilled and flexible workforce to flourish, the training and skills provision in place to ensure that they stay one step ahead of the curve, and the business support structure around them to provide help and guidance whenever it's needed. Sadly, COVID looks unlikely to go away of its own account, but for all the damage it is doing, there are opportunities too. New markets will open up, they are opening up, new business models present themselves, and new technologies are already being developed. So our approach in the Marches is to develop a strategy to steer our region's economy through this crisis. And that strategy is, that approach is twofold. We have to identify where help is needed and what form it must take. And we must ensure that we are well placed to take advantage of the opportunities that I've mentioned. Our Business Recovery Week this week has helped start to focus that conversation around the issues. Today's summit will begin the process of refining it so we can present a clear, well-evidenced strategy to regional and national government, which identifies both the support that we need and the opportunities that we're striving to grasp. We have an absolutely remarkable business community here in the Marches. You don't build a £14.3 billion economy in a largely rural area like ours without being something rather special. Today's summit will continue the process of ensuring that virus or no virus, we will continue to punch above our weight. I will be sharing the recovery priorities identified to date and asking some of you on the panel, and we have a great panel, I'll introduce them in a moment, to give their views and to put forward their views on their priorities for recovery. But we are also asking all of you attending, please do use the chat function to ask questions or to make comments. It would be just great. We want this to be as interactive as possible, but with almost 90 of you now on this session, we can't ask you all to speak. So use the chat function. We want to hear from you, and we will then be able to put something really special together. So we want to hear from you all. Said, please submit via the chat function, and I will pick up as many of your comments as I can. But let me make the last point. The Marches Local Enterprise Partnership does not have the word partnership in its title for nothing. We strongly believe that in working together with all of our partners and all of our communities, that is the only way that we can truly shape our future, which will benefit us all. So, having said all that and reminded you, please do put things in, any questions, any queries, anything in the chat box. Let me please very briefly introduce you to the panel who I will be turning to. I'm not going to ask them all to introduce themselves because they have so many achievements, it would take too long. But then I'm going to start some questions and ask views from everybody. So on our panel, we have Richard Sheehan, who is the CEO of Shropshire Chamber, Sharon Smith, who is the CEO of Hereford and Worcester Chamber. We have Paul Hinkins, Telford Business Board Chair, Paul Bennett, Shropshire Business Board Chair, Richard Lumbee, who's the Vice Chair from Shropshire Business Board, Frank Myers, the Chair of Herefordshire Business Board. We have Christine Snell, Ruth Shepherd, and Paul Kalinakis, who are all Marches Local Enterprise Partnership board members. We have Liz Wakeman-Jones from Telford and Wrekin Council, and possibly Catherine Kynaston as well. Roger Allenby from Herefordshire Council, Matt Potts and Hayley Owen from Shropshire Council, Rob Newbury from the FSB, Mike Goodall from the FSB, and I'm not sure, Holly, if you are the chair of the FSB, if you're on the call, Ryan Cartwright from the British Business Bank, and Ollie Hindle, who's from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, who is our sort of locals, our civil servant support. And I also have the LEP team of Jill Hamer, who is the LEP Chief Exec, Catherine Jones, and Ennis and lots of other people on this call. So thank you to all of the panel members. And I am now going to ask the first question. And I think what I will do is ask the question and then ask, if I may, the three business board chairs to come in and just give their views and then open it up to comments in the chat box. So first question, the LEP is lobbying central and regional government intensely for support for the Marches region to help with the recovery from COVID-19 and to start rebuilding our economy. On a call only this morning with Sir John Peace, who's the chair of Midlands Engine, we heard a lot about their ideas, across Midlands ideas, but I'd really welcome the views from business board chairs and then from the other panel members. What sectors need the most help and what type of support would you think that's really needed so that we can put something in our recovery plan that we can feed up to government? So can I ask Paul or Frank to come in here? Have any of you got some comments first? And then I'll go to the chambers. Frank, are you able to unmute?
Yep.
Have you got any views about what you would like to see as support, which sectors you would like to see support on?
There's an emerging problem with construction, isn't there? And I think that the gap in their output will start to show because there's been such a pause over the last 6 months. We know of some projects that have stalled. Although they're quite active at the moment, I think stamp duty has helped with the domestic sector. But I think that probably some form of incentive for starting construction contracts early and for moving them along early is the only thing I can think of. That sector is going to be in trouble, I think. Another general point that will affect most sectors, I just don't feel we're making an informed decision about lockdown in the effect it's having on staff working from home. And I've not yet seen any initiative to start to try and understand that in some detail. So for me, we should be researching the effect of working from home, its effect on productivity and its effect on well-being of staff. Those are my first two.
Thanks, Frank, and that's a good point. I'm going to come back to the mental health issues later because I think it's very, very important. I'm just trying to see if I've got, is Paul Bennett or Paul Hinkins on the call? If not, can I turn to Richard Sheehan and of Shropshire Chamber and then to Mike Goodall and just ask for your opinions about which sectors should be focused on. And don't forget, please, those of you, all of you listening in, please put your comments in the chat box. We want to know what you feel we need to be really looking at, deep diving in, and who needs the most help. Richard, shall I go to you?
You can now, I've unmuted, yes. Good afternoon, Mandy, and good afternoon, everybody. I think it's been widely touted for a long time that the tourism, leisure and hospitality sector, which is so important to us, has taken a terrible beating. And I do think that Frank is right in his discussion around construction as well, because of course construction does tend to support economic growth as the two are going. But there is a larger emerging issue, which is somewhat off the radar, which tends to be around supply chains to all sectors. We see the individual sectors that are affected, but we don't necessarily see the impact on supply chains. Many suppliers supply just to a particular sector, and as such, that's a really important part of the work that needs to be done. It's how do we support the supply chains as well as those sectors that are struggling. There are numerous sectors who are struggling to get people back into work and get customers. Obviously, retail, we know only too well the challenges that the retail sector is facing in terms of footfall and indeed managing the COVID safe environment that they face. We've got to look further at solutions there. There are many who are quite good at the digital world. There are still a lot that aren't, and there is, retail has definitely going to move, if it hasn't already, into a combined sort of situation where the digital world is so much more important. So that I think every sector is affected in some way, and the mental health issue of people working from home is a critical one. Somebody touched on, we need to, I think again, Frank, on researching it. As many will be aware, the Chamber have done 6 months of research on business sentiment, and we have been sharing that with stakeholders, and that has been fed into government on a regular basis. Currently, that is relatively dormant for us. We've had to downscale that as we've switched our focus to other levels of support. But it's absolutely right, it needs to happen. It needs to be joined up, because if people start getting surveys from all different parties, they just get survey overload and switch off. So there needs to be a collaborative activity to understand what's needed on the ground on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I mean, data, data evidence is absolutely crucial. As part of the Midlands engine, the LEP is able to pick up there's a very good data observatory, but actually that local intelligence that we've had through from the chambers, from the FSB, has been absolutely critical, and we really appreciate that. I am going to come back to the mental health issue later, so I don't want to labour that one. Could I just draw everybody's attention to the fact that we are going to be polling during this session, so and we'll give you some of the results. So please do vote on the polls that will be coming through, and we'll feedback just what people's views are. But Mike, shall I come to you, Mike Goodall from the FSB, and I know Sharon's on the call too. What I don't want, we just need to try and keep our answers fairly succinct, because I want to come to more people on the panelists. So, right, Mike, up to you. Over to you.
Take a hint. I shall keep this brief. Yeah, I certainly concur with what Frank was saying about construction. We're seeing that there's a lot of construction work was perhaps carried through the immediate crisis through contracts that were signed, sealed, delivered, if you like, before the pandemic hit. But there's been a bit of a hiatus since then. So certainly an issue building there. Events and hospitality and the nighttime economy, a big issue at the moment. We've got a lot of our members who've seen their cash flow, their revenues decrease really significantly and very quickly. And they were hoping, of course, to claw back some ground in the autumn and the run up to Christmas. And the 6-month extension doesn't help that at all. So just as a general comment, what we're also finding is that there's not necessarily a general trend within sectors. It's still quite variable. So the good news is that we're hearing of quite a few people who are just as busy, if not busier than they were before the pandemic. So that's good news and to be built upon. But undoubtedly, construction, events, nighttime economy, and as Richard mentioned, the high streets were struggling before this pandemic hit. And certainly this has not helped matters at all.
Thanks, Mike. That's interesting. And actually, we just had the first results from that first vote, and I think the biggest area of concern is hospitality, tourism, and the events sector. And again, at the Midlands Engine meeting this morning, Sir John Peace, the chair of Midlands Engine, was very clear that he feels that our visitor economy, the tourism sector, needs to. We really need to be focused on that, and I think he's undertaken to try and pull something together. He's incredibly placed with with government as well. So there will be some more work with the LEP and then the Midlands with the Midlands Engine as part of that partnership that we'll be doing on that. What I'd like to, I just wonder whether Sharon from the Chamber, are you available to say anything? And also Richard Lumbee, I know you're on the line on the call from the Shropshire Chamber. Would one of you like to comment quickly on this?
Hi Mandy, it's Sharon from Hereford and Worcester Chamber. Sorry everyone about the no camera. I've been caught out between two systems, as we all have been, I'm sure, at times, and this one doesn't have a camera, so I may leave and come back again in a minute. I just wanted to add to my colleagues, really, the thought I'd had around, or I and others have had around which sectors are suffering. And I really like the way it was described to me the other day about anybody with a high footfall, and it really made you start to think about those businesses that we've talked about about before could fall down the gaps. So we might say tourism or hospitality or leisure, but there's also the arts, the creative. There's all sorts of different niches of businesses where if they've got anything that needs a high kind of footfall, then they could be the ones to suffer over, you know, what's going to be a pretty hard winter. So I just thought I'd throw that one in, Mandy. Thank you.
Thanks. We've got some really interesting comments in the chat box, particularly around planning issues. We're very aware of the moratorium around in parts of Herefordshire around phosphate pollution. In fact, the LEP has recently just announced some funding for a project down in Herefordshire that we hope will maybe help with that. There's some very good comments, particularly again about tourism and about cultural tourism. So thank you very much. And that is noted. We absolutely understand the importance of our major cultural attractions, whether that's Hereford Cathedral with Mappa Monday, whether it's Ironbridge Museums, Ironbridge Gorge Museums. We're blessed across the Marches with some great attractions and cultural attractions. Yes, a very, very interesting. So we'll come back with on mental health. I'm just wondering from the panelist point of view, is there anything else that you want to say on this about sectors? I know, Ryan, you're on here from the business bank. What sort of view are you getting as a business bank about the sectors that are coming to you for funding? And have you got any sectors that you're thinking they really do need some support, which is not funds but actually grant support? What's your view?
Hi, Mandy. Yeah, it's interesting because we've got a range of schemes through the British Business Bank. The bounce back loans and the coronavirus business interruption loans have really been kind of a lifeline for many businesses and been sector agnostic in the main. So I think those schemes have kind of done their job to an extent. The Midlands Engine Investment Fund, which is what I look after for the West Midlands, that has continued to invest during COVID. And I think in terms of sectors that it's looked to support, I mean, one of the sectors was agri-tech. So one of our fund managers made an investment during COVID for some technology that was born out of Harper Adams University. So there was still investments going on around the tech and digital sector in particular. I think somebody put in the chat that actually we need to try and adopt digital and tech a lot more across sectors. So I think there's a few kind of common threads of businesses that are still seeking investment, have that kind of digital transformation going on, or have kind of tech at the heart of what they're looking to diversify and pivot towards. So certainly businesses that are transforming their kind of tech base, but traditional kind of businesses through the West Midlands really. So we've continued to see manufacturing and engineering businesses access funding through the Midlands Engine Investment Fund. As you'll know, there's various kind of criteria that restrict certain sectors. So some of the ones which are badly affected at the moment, leisure, tourism, hospitality and retail, traditionally with MEIF, they wouldn't have been eligible. We've managed to kind of get around it in a way. So our ERDF restrictions have been relaxed. So some of those sectors have now been in scope. And also the requirement to create jobs has now gone away. So our fund managers don't need that as an output. What they need is to be able to retain jobs or create jobs as well. So it's trying to flex those schemes really to meet the demands of the sectors that really need them. But short answer is every sector has still been trying to apply for all those schemes through ourselves. So yeah, it's kind of similar to the comments that have gone before, Mandy.
Thanks very much. And I've got a question around grants and funding, which I'm going to run through the panel, but I know, Frank, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, reverting to the planning issue, Mandy, one of the things we've been very concerned about at the Herefordshire Business Board for a while is speed of decision making. And the difference that can make has been highlighted really remarkably by the COVID problem that, you know, in the health service, it's being said that they managed to do in 2 weeks what would normally take 2 years. And we think that culture reflects across the public sector. And we at the Business Board have offered to do some analysis work to speed up the process of all processes. And I think planning sits very neatly into that, because we want an urgent approach to it, as I'm sure colleagues are saying.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the transformation in the health and care sector has been just incredible through this COVID crisis. Do any of the other people on the panel want to say anything around sectors? Or, I've got a message from Richard Lumbee that he's not able to, just need to ask the tech support, is Richard Lumbee from the Shropshire Business Board, are we able to hear from him? And I know that we've had a comment that not all of you are able to see the questions in the chat function. If you go to the chat function, there is a little box and you should be able to say to all panelists and attendees. If you do that, then hopefully you will be able to see all of the chat. So you'll see the questions and the points that are coming through. If you can't see that, then could you just send a message to me, please? Just to the panelists, just saying you can't see it. But we're told that it should be, at least I think it should be coming through to everybody. But okay, I'll wait for some comments on that. Have we got Richard Lumbee available now?
Yes, I think you have.
Hi, Richard. Right, what's the view from the Shropshire Business Board?
Well, I mean, probably not necessarily from the Shropshire Business Board, but just making an observation, I think, on the point around construction. And there's clearly a lot of public money injected in all sorts of different ways. We know it's public procurement, and things are going to be procured, very much the same ways as they always are, which aren't necessarily quick. And I think anything at all that can be accelerated from any public sector organisations in terms of their procurement would make a lot of difference. And this is possible. We know it's possible. It would really, really help. I think the worry, the fear of commercial officers in public sector organisations of making an error in selecting the tenderers or making sure that they've got the right numbers is something that really needs to be looked at, and that would put a lot more work on the ground. I think the other thing relates to commercial developers, people who put money in, not necessarily house building. But I think there's a need for the entire circular arrangement around, let's say, retail development or commercial development to be really understood, because they're highly unlikely to invest at the moment when those sectors themselves are fragile, or indeed, for example, the office sector. There's real questions about, is this the way that the future will be? So those things are really quite complex, and not just sort of driven by, for argument's sake, the construction sector. It's the construction, it's the developers, and it's actually the end users and the people who ultimately finance and use those areas. So it's a complex arrangement which needs some real thinking about.
Yes, I can't help but to agree with you on that. I'm going to move us on, because I think there's an awful lot of chat coming through now around funding, particularly for the support for those businesses that have actually fallen through the gaps in the funding support so far. So if I can ask the panel, and if you feel strongly you want to come in straight away, let me know. But we really do know that cash flow for SMEs is an ongoing issue. What are the measures? And we've had the vote, we've had the polling, but I'd be interested in hearing your views on the panel. What's the measures that you believe will most help businesses in terms of their funding needs? I mean, I know one big bone of contention for many is when bigger companies up the supply chain take longer to pay their bills. And actually, the NHS are very much doing that at the moment. So where you have pressure from big customers onto small businesses, where those customers will not pay their invoices in a timely manner. So that's a personal beef of mine. What does the panel feel would make a real difference? And Richard, I think you have your hand raised first.
I do, yes. I think, well, our research that I touched on earlier showed us that not only had many businesses got grave concerns about the future, many of them were showing just 3 months of cash in bank to actually see them through challenges. We know from the feedback there is a reluctance to borrow. There are many people still involved in businesses today who experience the banking behaviour of the recession, and that has still made them very nervous because they recognise that at some point these loans have got to be paid back. And I appreciate the extensions and the other things that happen, but there is a nervousness about ability to pay back because of the complete uncertainty that the majority of businesses face over the coming months and possibly years. So the model of grant funding and grant support is actually something which naturally everybody will embrace. It's expensive, but it's necessary in a time such as this. So there will be some who will borrow. Generally, those are the ones who are doing well and can see the future ahead. But the nucleus of people can't see the future ahead at the moment, and therefore they are reluctant to get involved in something which could cost them their house in the not too distant future.
That's a really well made point, Richard. Thank you. I know that Mike Goodall has said that he would like to answer, and I wonder whether we could then go maybe to Liz Wakeham-Jones from Telford and Wrekin Council, who has really led on the recovery grant scheme that was launched yesterday. So let's go to Mike and then to Liz, and then to Holly, Holly Whittles, who I'm going to be very cheeky and ask her to represent Telford and Wrekin Business Board, because I know you're on the business board. So Liz. Sorry, Mike first, then Liz. Sorry.
Thanks, Mandy. Yes, just echoing the point that Richard made, we're finding that a lot of our members, small businesses, are extremely reluctant to take out any further loans at the moment. While repayment extensions are welcome, it's kind of missing the point because the money still has to be paid back at some point. And the problem is, with no certainty in the system at the moment, when that repayment falls due, could still be just as big a problem if it's knocked down the line. So one of the ideas that we're floating at Federation of Small Businesses is that we look at, where loans are concerned, a sort of almost a student loan type model, whereby the loan is made but doesn't become repayable until the business is back in a position where it can actually afford to do so. It's a big ask, I know, but that would at least then give businesses the confidence to access that finance, and introduces an element of certainty that they don't have to repay until they're in a position to do so. So they can then start to plan for the future. Just on grants, I would say that, you know, those are probably more attractive at the moment because they're generally not repayable. But again, an issue there is they do tend to be time limited. So, for example, a lot of the support measures that were introduced by the government, which we absolutely welcomed at the time, they sort of were all due to end around now, because the thinking at the time was that the virus would sort of pack up and go away quietly, and of course it hasn't. So again, these kinds of almost artificial deadlines, cut-off points, if you like, we're looking at that to see if there can be more open-ended support, so that people aren't always fearful of sort of falling off a knife edge when those schemes suddenly wind down. So quite big asks, but they would at least help to introduce some certainty and enable businesses to start to plan for the future rather than just worry about when repayments are falling due.
That's really useful. Ryan from the British Business Bank has been listening to that. Is there anything quickly before I go to Liz, Ryan, that you wanted to come back on that? Are there any discussions going on about some sort of scheme to, particularly for SMEs and micro SMEs, around making the funds available, the loans more attractive and pushing out?
Yes, is the short answer, and it's predominantly around the bounce back loans, because the CBILS loans typically have a manager from a bank or a lender kind of involved in that application process. So recovery of those shouldn't be too difficult, but the bounce back loans, which has been self-certification, is where the problem may lie. So there's certainly been discussions with ourselves and Treasury. I know the FSB, CBI, and other kind of business lobbying organisations have been involved in that. So Mike's idea has probably been fed in. It's ultimately up to the Chancellor how he wants to play that. But all we can do is keep feeding in the intel that we're getting on the ground, which is why these kind of events are really, really useful. The more people saying the same thing, hopefully it gets heard a lot louder. But just to cover off a point, Mandy, that you mentioned in terms of some of the larger companies not paying the smaller companies. If anybody's not aware of the Small Business Commissioner, really good service in terms of trying to get money out of those larger corporates. They do tend to name and shame some of the larger corporates, which manages to get your money out pretty quick. So just in case you are really stuck against a brick wall with some of the big companies.
Thank you, that's really useful. I'm going to go to Liz, if I may, next. And there is a comment from Mary, which is saying that the grant launched yesterday is very complicated and time consuming, but also the deadline window has put people off. Is there a way to make it easier and without the pressure of a short deadline? So that's to put you on the spot, Liz.
Okay.
What are your comments?
Well, the grant that launched yesterday, the Marches Small Business Recovery Grant, was an ERDF pot. So we do have to follow certain criteria and eligibility, hence why.
Liz, you're quite quiet. Sorry to cut across you, but you're actually quite quiet. Can you move your microphone?
Microphone's higher. Yeah, so it's an ERDF pot. I was probably too loud now. So some of the criteria and eligibility is quite tight, hence why the application process does seem very onerous. So, you know, we do have to follow those rules and regulations for the scheme. The wider economy pot will actually close this evening at 5 o'clock. So we've had a lot of interest in that one already, but there is still available applications for the visitor economy. So if anybody's within the visitor economy, then please do go onto the system and try and access that. The pot is from 1,000 to 3,000 for grants. Hopefully this will help some of the small businesses we do have within our 3 boroughs. We appreciate it's not a huge amount of money, but obviously we wanted to be able to support as many businesses as we were able to do so. We've also still got some other European funding pots that are open, so we can still support other business growth, pivoting, capex expenditure, energy efficiency, etc. So we do have that open as well.
Thanks, Liz. And actually that goes to a point that's been put in the chat box from, let me just scroll down, a colleague from Herefordshire about reducing red tape, speeding up the process and admin times for grants, and ensure there isn't any territory sector bias. As the point was where enterprise grants get awarded, Herefordshire is not just about Skylon and Rotherwas. Small businesses, areas like Ross need help too. I think, and it goes on, you'll all be able to read the question. I think I absolutely can read the frustration into your comments. Do speak to the Growth Hub in Hereford, and if you speak to them, they will be able to advise you about what is available. We try very hard not to have any geographical or sector bias, but for many grants there are rules that have to be followed. But as Liz was saying, there are grants available at the moment for some capital expenditure. So speak to the Growth Hub. They're really worthwhile. We've also had some comments, which we're not going to be able to necessarily discuss, but a really interesting comment from Chris Milton. National retailers are not paying levies to bids. Bids, for those of you who don't know, business improvement districts. There are a number now across the Marches. The bids are working really, really hard to try and improve footfall to town centres. And it's not helped when national retailers are not paying the levy, but it's just the independent retailers and the smaller businesses. That's a really good point, Chris, and we'll make sure that we feed that back through our sort of channels, particularly into the Midlands, where some of the big retailers are actually based. We've talked about the other area that I know was of concern. We had a very heartfelt comment from a learning centre for people with learning disabilities. They've been hit really hard as they've been shut for 4 months. And that's because they can't have the social distancing. I know day centres have been very, very badly impacted. I'm not sure if you know, but I actually, as part of my business, have a day centre, and that's been closed since April. And we've made the heartbreaking decision that we're not going to be reopening it as a day centre for people with complex dementias. So it is very difficult, and you're quite right, those services are disappearing. I think that is something certainly in some areas, and I'm looking at Frank at the moment. I know that the Community Foundation in Herefordshire has been providing some really good support for some community-based enterprises from the voluntary community and the business sector. So it might be worth you touching base if you're in Herefordshire with the Community Foundation down there. In Shropshire, the Community Foundation is run through the Staffordshire and Shropshire Community Foundation, or speak to the Shropshire RCC and they might be able to help. Holly, though, I was going to come to you for a Telford Business Board point of view. Are you on the call?
I am, Mandy, thank you.
Hi,
So for those who don't know, the makeup of these business boards are from business owners, they're from the education sectors, they're from every area of industry. So we get a really good view across the board, and including like the membership organisations as well. So we've been very closely talking to the businesses affected in the region and helping push back, and where businesses have been falling through the cracks, passing that on to can be lobbied back up to government again. But what we have been doing within the business boards are forming subgroups to help drive innovation and collaboration on particular areas that are really struggling. Like, for example, we formed a digital working subgroup to look about how we can bring digital skills and innovation back to Telford and Shropshire and Hereford and all of our areas, and even discussing bringing the business boards working together on some of these subgroups as well. So it's a really positive move forward from the business boards.
Well, as you know, I'm a huge fan of the business boards. As a previous chair, I should be, but that business voice into the LEP and be able to be part of the partnership with our public sector colleagues, with our higher and further education colleagues, is absolutely crucial. And that evidence base driving what we can achieve as the local enterprise partnership and the wider mechanisms that exist across the Midlands, Midlands Engine, Midlands Connect, and then lobbying our MPs. Jill and I have met with all but 2 of our MPs in the last 5 days, and we have very regular meetings now. It's really important that we have a strong voice from business and from the voluntary and community sector, actually from all enterprises going back into government. Are there any other panelists, get my teeth back in, any other panelists wanting to comment on that? Or shall we, as we're just about halfway through this, shall I move on to, I'm going to maybe sit back on this one a little bit. I'd like the views of the panel on the success of the, or what do they feel the success will be of the new job support scheme, and is it what we need as the furlough scheme disappears? So, comments. The furlough scheme has, we know, protected jobs. We have had jobless figures released today. We are seeing increases in the number of people unemployed. What are people's views about the government's replacement scheme, the new job support scheme and the part-time job support scheme? Will they protect jobs? Are they going to make the difference that we hope? Any comments? Anybody would like to comment on that? Ooh.
If I can, well, it's partly a question and partly a comment, Mandy. This 67% or 2/3 thing, I've not been able to work out whether that relates to gross pay or net pay, because a lot of people, once you take deductions into account, probably only see 2/3 of their gross pay as net pay. But that leads to the question, how many of those people are out there? So does 2/3 serve a lot of people with the same net pay or not? I don't know the answer to that, and I think we could do with some clarification.
Frank, that's a really good point, and I wonder whether our BRO, our business representative organisations, might have a bit more on that. I don't want to get into a lot of detail on the detail, or a lot of detail. That's a really ridiculous phrase, isn't it? You know what I mean? But we haven't got time to go into the detail. But I think there's a lot that still needs to be confirmed. What I'm interested, I've actually had comments. It's based on gross pay, so it's on gross pay, but is it going to make a difference? As a business, we've got we've got over 90, almost 100 businesses now online. Is it going to make a difference to you if you are having to decide whether to continue to employ somebody? Is this scheme going to make the difference, or are you going to continue to downsize? That's something we really do want to know. What difference it's going to make. What's the feedback from looking at let's go to Sharon and then maybe Richard and Mike briefly on this from the BROs. Do you feel that this scheme is going to be fit for purpose? Sharon, are you there? If you are, you're on mute. Otherwise, Richard, can I go to you, please?
Yeah, certainly, Mandy. I'll step in. I'm sure Sharon will join us shortly. Certainly, early indications are that there's not a lot of excitement about it, particularly if you look at the lower end of the wage economy. I've seen some figures that suggest that some people on minimum wage could end up on about £5.30 a day, which seems incredible. Sorry, an hour, beg your pardon, which is obviously a real challenge for them. So the initial response from business that we've had has been one of quite significant disappointment. I think it's like everything, when you've had something, you want something equally as big, and naturally it isn't. There is flexibility, which is important, and that's something we lobbied very hard for on the furlough scheme, and actually we had a great win on that because the government did adjust that. But I think the general consensus, this is a starter for 10, and I think the suggestion is there will be more will have to come. Government is saying no, they won't, but then they say lots of things and then they do different things. So it's not, in the initial responses, it is not going to have the desired effect that government thinks it will.
Thanks, Richard. Mike, have you got any views on this? And there is a question in the box, in the chat box, saying, is this scheme just for the top 2 tiers of lockdown? My understanding, and was that it was for all businesses across the country. Not, yeah, okay. So hopefully, where's it gone? Yeah, Mary, so it is for all, it's not just in the top 2 tiers. There are additional, there is some additional support if you are forced into lockdown. But the new job support scheme is actually for all businesses. So Mike, over to you.
Yes, to say we, FSB, sort of cautiously welcomed the announcement a week or so ago that there would be some form of further support. And we think it will give some hope to some businesses, but it's not going to do everything for all. It's by no means a sort of long-term solution going forward. So what we're looking at now is really what the evolution of business support is going to be, given that the pandemic isn't going away. It's going to be with us for some time. And when these lockdown measures do come into force, what we've been saying to government is that where businesses have to close or significantly scale back their operations, that lockdown, if you like, or those imposed restrictions need to go hand in hand with appropriate levels of support to help those businesses through, particularly where, of course, we're talking now about viable businesses that would otherwise go to the wall. The point there being that, you know, being an optimist, at some point this pandemic will go away or be more manageable, and at that point we will want to get back to some kind of business as normal and life as normal. And if viable good businesses have gone to the wall in the meantime, even when we come out the other side of the pandemic, then we won't have the goods, services, outlets and so forth that we would want to get back to normal. So it's important that we protect businesses now, and that will have to be more targeted, undoubtedly. And we need to make sure that it goes, as I say, hand in hand with tighter restrictions and lockdowns. We will need appropriate support in place, and that may be a furlough scheme or something like that, maybe something different.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point about the potential impact on businesses if we have to go into a higher level of lockdown. At the moment within the Marches, we're on the lowest level, but we're already seeing London is probably going to be going up as a tier. But certainly in areas that have had longer term lockdowns in the East Midlands, there has been quite a significant impact on their business community there. Lots of interesting stuff, and there is an issue there about developing digital skills. We're going to come to digital in a moment, if you bear with me. But I'm getting the feeling that there is some concern about the government scheme, so that's useful, so thank you. What I'd like to do is then, if there's no one else on the panel who wants to say anything about that is just actually move to the actual unemployment figures themselves that were issued yesterday. They have shown an increase in numbers of the number of universal credit claimants. Jill, are you able just to paint that picture for the marches for us?
Yep, I'm just finding the data that we got this morning on my screen.
Nothing like me putting my wonderful team on the spot.
No,
I apologise.
So what we're looking at, I think the figures, we've got the September 20 figures. So we're looking at all claimants across the marches, and that's gone up to 5.1%. West Midlands is 7.4, and the Great Britain figure is 6.5. Now, Shropshire and Herefordshire will know that they used to be down kind of a year ago from now in the kind of more the 1 and 2%, and I think Telford was more like. But you can correct me on that one if. No, I'm just trying to find, close something down. Maybe you could correct me on that from Liz, but I think it was more like 3 to 4% unemployment about this time last year. So if you go to those figures, as I say, for the March, we haven't got the breakdown for the individual areas yet, but from that perspective, and I've just lost my numbers. Sorry about this. I keep losing the numbers.
It's more than double.
Yeah, it's more than double.
In the March, it's basically doubled. We were always very, very low, but we know now that we have significantly more. And my understanding, it is unduly, it is more young people who are out of work. So it's the impact on young people that is the real concern, and that has to be our concern. We desperately need to keep our young people in work, in education, training, otherwise we'll have a lost generation. So I think, and Liz, I can see you nodding your head. Would you like to come in here?
Yeah, sorry, I don't seem to have a hand facility, so I can't put my hand up, so I'll just wave my real hand.
Wave, if any of you on the panel, just wave. LEP.
Yeah, just picking up what you were saying, really. Obviously, we've got the Kickstart scheme, which the Chamber can, and Richard can tell you more about. But obviously, we're helping push people in the direction of the Chamber of businesses that are keen to access the Kickstart scheme. We've also got our Job Box Job Match scheme, whereby we're trying to help match companies that are making redundancies with companies in our area that are actually employing people at the moment. So not surprisingly, there are always winners in situations like this. So our food producers, our packaging companies, our agri-tech type companies, some of our IT and professional services companies are flying at the moment within Telford. So if we can hook up HR directors from a company that's making redundancies to a company that's employing people, and make sure that we're opening people's eyes to the fact that you can reskill, upskill, change focus a little bit. I think perhaps not as in such a crass way that the marketing came out the other day from some government body with the ballerina who didn't know she wanted to be in cybersecurity yet, but there are people in retail or hospitality that will have perfect skills that will match some of the companies that are looking for people at the moment. So if we can help support, match those industries and those businesses together, you know, we'll help where we can to make sure that we get those people back into work again.
Need to unmute. Yes, I know Richard wants to say something and Mike Goodall wants to say something, and then I'm going to move us on, if I may. So Richard.
Thank you. Jill, I'm not sure if those figures are the up to August ones that you have. They seem to be the latest ones that are around.
September, Richard.
Oh, you've got September, have you? Oh, that's really good. I haven't seen those. I know for the up to August ones, we were close to 4,000 16 to 24-year-olds across the marches who were signing on for universal credit. And of course, there is a lag of about 4 to 6 weeks on some of these figures. So, you know, it can only probably get worse, unfortunately, before it gets better. Liz touched on the Kickstarters program that is focused on the 16 to 24-year-old group. We've got 443 vacancies now offered by businesses across Shropshire. Sorry, bad timing with the dog. 443 vacancies from 168 companies, which is really encouraging, because the S of the SMEs are playing their part in this at a local level. They see the value of supporting our workforce of the future, and they get their role to pitch in. But of course, we do have a lot more mature people as well, with a whole skill set that we need somehow to engage. And Liz's job box and things like that need to be replicated, where we can actually help make a difference and get these people to use their skills in businesses as they need them, because we're going through huge transition at the moment, and businesses need to upskill people within it and bring in those skills that they need for the future. So unemployment is a concern. There are the younger people, of course, are our employees, are business owners of the future, and it's really important that we support them now in what is going to be a really significant time of need.
Just to also say on the
Thanks, Richard. Jill, do you want to?
Yeah. Just to also say on the Kickstart, the same operation is happening across Herefordshire, and Hereford and Worcester Chamber are also working with you, Richard, aren't you, on and Landau, I think, one of the that's working with people who are further away from the job market already and are trying to get into work. So I think you're working as a kind of consortium, Richard, would it be fair to say, across with Sharon at Hereford and Worcester Chamber, with referrals from Herefordshire Council as well. Yes. So you are doing it as a kind of cross Marches initiative. So if people want to find out more, do go in through the chambers, but the 3 local authorities would also refer you into that process, and anybody working with charitable bodies as well that are struggling also work through Landau as well. I think that'd be fair to say, would it, Richard?
Yes, Jill, we are trying to send each one of these individuals into a job role with a whole menu of upskilling opportunity, liaising with colleges, other people who've got funded provision, so that not only will the business use its £1,500 wraparound support to help develop these people, but also we'll tap into and provide a menu of all the support services that are out there, so that we simplify the process. And for those who unfortunately don't end up staying in the roles that they're in, they come out with a really good skill set. And we've heard about mental health. That's one of the areas we're looking at, mental health first aid training, amongst many, many other things. So yeah, working in collaboration is the only way to make it the success it's going to be.
Thanks, Richard. And there's some really interesting comments. One of the comments in the chat box is the requirements that in this Kickstart scheme of having 30 placements put a lot of employers off. That's why the innovative schemes such as the Shropshire Chamber and working with Landau has enabled smaller businesses to actually just put 1 or 2 vacancies up. So it's a collective approach. Yeah, I know you want to come in, Richard, but I'm going to move on because I'm going to ask Mike Goodall to come in here, but we know that this has been an issue, which is why we've got some really innovative schemes working across the Marches. So Mike.
Just very briefly, and as a reminder, FSB is also an intermediary on the Kickstarter scheme nationally. So we're a gateway as well, certainly for smaller small businesses. And we're working in partnership with the DECO to similarly provide a complete wraparound service to small businesses. So we're enjoying great success with that at the moment. We've got thousands of applications nationally, and they're progressing through the system well. So it looks like the scheme's going to be very effective, which is good news.
Which I think that just goes to show, doesn't it, Mike and Richard, that actually, whilst the headline was you needed 30 places to take part in this, actually the business sector and certainly the business representative organisation have stepped up and are actually working collaboratively and across with the voluntary and community sector as well, and really offering something that is going to be of use to small businesses and particularly to young people to get them into education, into training, which is great.
Sorry, Chair. I really must go on this. Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, we're averaging about 2.5 vacancies per business that's come forward. So this is a really big thing for us, because these young people will get a real rounded experience in a smaller business. It's not 10s and 20s going into warehousing or other things. And the other thing, just to finish off, is there's some unbelievable jobs on these lists that people are offering in terms of the 6-month program. It's just mind-blowing what businesses are offering opportunities to our young people across the Marches. So, you know, we should all be very proud to be part of this, and we will collectively make it absolutely brilliant.
And we need to make sure it's publicised. So I know that there's some really good things. Frank, you wanted to talk about outplacement, and also my LEP colleague, our LEP colleague, I should say, Frank, Christine Snell wants to come in here. So shall I go to Christine first and then come to you?
Yes.
So Christine, hi. You're on mute.
Hi.
Hello.
Mandy, I was just in the process of typing a chat, so I'll stop that now. What I wanted to say was, with regard to matching work opportunities with available labour that may happen as a result of some of the ending of the furlough scheme and so on, there is still a significant demand for people to work in the agri and horticultural sector. So please don't underestimate that. That's a message to everyone. And as the end of this year's SWEP programme, which is the Seasonal Agricultural Workers programme that the government have been piloting, where we've been able to recruit people from outside the EU, as that draws to a close, which it will do in December, then there will inevitably be opportunities arising January onwards. So I just want to make it clear that there are great opportunities in our sector. Nobody in the food production and supply sector, to my knowledge, has even thought of furloughing anyone. That we're all working flat out to keep the multiple retailers stocked. So please remember us when you're thinking of labour that may be available and people needing work positions.
I think it's really important to emphasise, isn't it, Christine, that we're not talking about necessarily just low-level jobs. That there's a huge of roles within the food production side which are really interesting. There is this perception that it's just about really low-level jobs, and it's not, is it?
Absolutely, this is a key point, Mandy. This is yes, it's a preconceived idea that it's all you know, struggling outside in Wellingtons knee deep in mud. It absolutely is not the case. Let's get that clear. Jobs, the work is very well paid. Everyone is paid in our business, for example. Everyone is paid the minimum of the national living wage, nothing less, regardless of age. So. No, there are many jobs available, and they're in pack house, in packing lines, just the same as you would be if you're working for Amazon or any of the other big sort of distribution people. The work is in good conditions, and there's jobs in quality management, in all sorts of IT roles. There's a great opportunity there, so please do not overlook our sector when you're thinking of placing young people, any people, in work opportunities.
Thank you, Christine. And I could say the same for my sector, which is social care, which is actually has a huge gamut of roles, and particularly more and more digitally enabled roles, people who are technologically able and looking at being able to do coding and all sorts of things. So a lot of job roles are actually changing very, very quickly and provide real opportunity. Anyway, Frank, I'll come to you, and then I think I've got Sharon Smith, who's back on from Hereford and Worcester Chamber, who wants to come on. And then I'm bearing in mind where we are on the time, I need to move on. So Frank, and then briefly Sharon, and then we'll move on.
Thanks, Mandy. This business of people being thrust out of work, there's a great deal of evidence to show that when suddenly faced with redundancy and the feeling that everything's fallen apart, there's not a lot of thinking about where the opportunities might be, and outplacement is the process that talks to people, helps them understand what they actually are. You might be a carpenter and you could be a plumber. You might manage a factory, but you could manage an agricultural food production outfit. And some people need help with that. And I think we, as a LEP and as a nation, should formally put in place a proper support organisation. We should fund the professional help that these people need, because it can make a huge difference. I actually used to work in it about 20 years ago, and it is amazing. First of all, it gives people moral support, but it also then gives them direction, and of course can be the catalyst for matching vacancies to people.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea, and it's something that maybe we need to take offline and just see how we can lobby for that to be available, Frank. So thank you for that, because I absolutely agree with you. Sharon, you wanted to come in on this conversation, and then I'm going to move us on to a very brief discussion about the impact of COVID on the health of our workforce. But Sharon, over to you first.
Hi Mandy, thanks. Yeah, just really quickly, it was going back slightly to the Kickstart scheme, just in case anyone was unclear. The role of the Gateway organisation is to join together those small businesses that can apply for 1, 2 or 6 or 8 placements, up to that terrible number of 30. So that's our role, so everybody can get involved in that. And just to let the Herefordshire businesses know, we're working with NMIT, the university, who've got some really great self-help modular training that we've picked out a few that will be really useful for businesses and for those young people to study within. So that's quite an exciting opportunity and partnership for us, just for the Herefordshire businesses. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. So the next question, or the next sort of discussion point I just wanted to raise, it's been highlighted actually by a number of the panelists already and in the chat, is the impact of COVID on the well-being of our employees and of the wider community. And that's, so the mental health. Now, I'm aware that Richard is probably going to want to come in here because Shropshire Chamber are doing something on this. My deputy chair of LEP, who unfortunately couldn't make this session this afternoon, Sonia Roberts, her day job is the CEO of Landau Trust. She's got a very special interest in mental health, and we're looking at how we can, what support is out there. There is, I only learned today, but you know, it's great to learn all the time, that the Midlands Engine actually launched last year a mental health productivity pilot. It's funded by Midlands Engine, and it's a partnership of Midlands Universities, local authorities, and the mental health charity Mind, which was set up to support Midlands employers of all sizes improve workplace mental health. Now, I'm ashamed to say I didn't know about it. I think from looking at the chat box, certainly, I think it's Emily McArdle has said, what about the Midlands Engine scheme? This is it. We will find out more, Emily, and we will put some more information up on the LEP website. But I just wonder, because this is such an important area, whether any panelists want to talk about what they're aware of is available to businesses and to the our wider communities around this issue of mental health. Richard, do you want to come in here? Is there anybody else?
Liz wants to come in, Mandy.
Oh, sorry, Liz.
It's okay. I'm just flying my hand around again. I hang around on LinkedIn quite a lot, as some people might see on who are part of this group today. And there's loads of different activities around mental health, around the workplace. I saw something lovely yesterday that said we don't work from home anymore, we live at work, which I certainly feel I'm doing. I also read an article that said that 2/3 of employers feel like their home workers are actually being less productive than they were a few months ago. So I think people have definitely got into a little bit of a slump. It's a bit Groundhog Day, getting up, sitting at your computer, etc. But if you hang around LinkedIn like I do, there are loads of companies offering lots of different sessions, lots of different training practices. You'll see the likes of one of our largest employers in Telford, Capgemini, that do some wonderful things with mental health and how they keep their teams buoyant through these difficult times through their fitness activities, etc., etc. So LinkedIn is a great place to source these bits of information, certainly.
Thanks, Liz. So there's some really good stuff coming through on the chat, for which I'm so grateful to everybody. Mike, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just very quickly to say that we've actually got like the other organisations, we've got a fairly heavy programme of business support seminars, and that includes one next week on the mental health productivity pilot, which is being run through Derby University, but also it's actually being run through the Marches. So we're very much working with the university to promote that at a local level. Nationally, we've actually have and have had for a while now something called the Wellbeing Hub. So if you're an FSB member, you can access a range of online resources, which is very much around support for mental and physical health and well-being. And we've noticed through our contact centre, nationally and locally, there's been a huge uplift in the number of people accessing those services for the very reasons that people are hearing now. So there's lots of stuff out there available to access. There's lots of resources on our website. I'm sure it's the same on the Chambers and other business support websites. And so there are lots of events at the moment. It does seem to be coming to the fore as an issue, and more people are very much pushing it. So it'd be good to see you there on the 21st. We've got an event then. We've got a national webinar coming up as well, all available from our events pages on our website. So do take a look. It's all free to attend, and very useful questions they are too.
I think what I'm going to do, Richard, I know that you or one of your dogs wants to come in, but I'm aware we've only got a few more minutes, and I've got a couple of other questions or discussion items. So what I would say to everybody on this call, please do have a look at the Chamber websites and at the FSB websites, and look to see what support's there, and also local authorities. And there are links on the LEP website to all of those. But my next question, and this is especially for you, Sean Carville, I know that you've been putting quite a few things in the chat box. The Marches has made big strides in recent years to improve digital connectivity, but the crisis has placed our digital networks under increased strain as more people work from home. What, in your view, those of you on in this summit, would be your priorities for improving the digital infrastructure for the Marches SMEs? Now, the obvious person to come to first would be you, Holly, and I'm sure I'm going to get some comments from Sean in the chat box. Holly, what would be your priorities?
Well, we're coming at it from a data analytics point of view, so we've been helping a lot of businesses transform their businesses. With staff going off on furlough, they've still got to do all their management information reporting, especially the CEO and the leadership boards. They need to know nationally how their companies are performing, so we've been helping them put better reporting processes in place, and this has been a massive step forward for them, to taking them out the dark ages of Excel spreadsheet hell and moving them forward into a digital era where we're actually helping to safeguard jobs, because rather than people sitting there doing data entry, they're actually been able to use this data in a meaningful way. They've got real life reporting dashboards, and we're helping these organisations transform. So for example, we've worked with a national chain of gyms, and they were trying to work out whether they could reopen again. So they needed to know, they needed to predict the future. So we were using machine learning with them. We were also doing heat spots within the gym. So if there's too many people in there, it wouldn't actually let them in. So there's all sorts of innovation going on around digital and tech. But I know that I've been part of many discussions that locally we are looking at the digital infrastructure, the improvement of 5G, broadband in the rural areas. I know this is a key theme, and probably there's someone else on the panel that could probably better go into that, but I know it's massively on our agenda.
Thanks, Holly. And yeah, the digital, we currently have the West Mercia 5G pilot that is ongoing in certain parts of our patch. Have been some delays with that, but there is a lot of learning. But I think, certainly as somebody who works in the sticks, and I can see you, Richard, it's the capacity of the network to actually cope with those of us who need to work remotely is a major issue. Richard.
Yeah, the infrastructure is a huge problem, as many of us who live in the sticks can verify, both from a broadband point of view and a mobile telephony point of view, both of which are really key for working from home. But what we also have in many cases is antiquated equipment. So we can have an accelerated system, but if your piece of kit isn't able to cope with it, of course, then you're going nowhere. So there's a big piece of work to do around the auditing of equipment within a business. And possibly this is something where the Marches LEP could look at some additional grant funding to support businesses to change old kit for new. I know it's not their place to do it, but at a time of need like this, it's probably very relevant, because many people have got very old laptops, very old desktops that You could give it the fastest connection in the world, but they can't cope with it.
Yeah, you make a good point. I mean, just to clarify, sadly, the LEP doesn't sit on a pot of revenue funding, but we are making very strong, we're lobbying very strongly to government that LEPs are a very good way, very good route for this type of support. So I don't disagree with you. I think there's some interesting comments on the chat box about remote working will become more prominent. And of course, that has the unintended consequence, to take Frank's point, that if we're going to see more and more office space becoming available, and I think it will lead to some real changes within our town centres, town and city centres, and real opportunity. But there certainly are some unintended consequences of this move to home working, some of which is around loneliness, being quite cut off from colleagues. I think most of us are social and we want to see people. The other issue is, and as Sean has just said, is it's understanding technology, and for SMEs, that for many of us, that is a key thing. And much earlier on, we saw some very good comments around we need to improve digital skills. And as the LEP, we're very aware of that, but we do need to really upskill our number of our employees to make sure that they actually have the skills necessary to move our businesses and our economy forward. Is there anybody else in my panel that would like to comment on digital? I'm just looking to see if anybody's waving madly at me. Oh, Richard, hi, thank you.
Hi, during the summer, in the early part of the summer, the government put in place the Eat Out scheme, the £10 scheme. And I do wonder whether or not there's sort of opportunity there for central government to look at funding consumers in relation to that latter comment about the quality and the age of digital equipment that individuals and companies have. And I think if we pair it back as against company support through grants and aids back to the sort of the individual and the consumer themselves, then that type of area could be a real a real boost to people using digital, both handheld, have they got handhelds at work as well as desktop. So just a point there, and something I think, Mandy, that we could potentially the LEP could take back to government.
It's really interesting you say that, because in the care sector, NHS Digital has just procured 11,000 iPads that are being distributed to SME providers of social care. So they're actually providing some kit. Now, for those of us who have been investing in digital for a long while, there was a bit of, but actually it's made a real difference, and it's enabling people small providers to go online, to be able to access patient records and move into the digital world. So it is something that government has accepted. So I think it's a very important point that you make there, Richard. I think, Sharon, you'd like to come back in on this?
Yeah, hi, just following up on Richard from Shropshire Chambers' point. I think it's a great one about helping companies to invest in that digital equipment, that IT equipment. But I do wonder, I mean, I don't know, but collectively, is it capital, not revenue? Because obviously it's got a long life, some of this equipment, so it just might be something to investigate. But also like to give a bit of a shout out for the link to cyber security, and again, it's an area that we know businesses sometimes struggle with, not everybody but some businesses, and it is really linked to that old equipment as well. So actually, if it's an area we're going to focus on, we could be thinking about the broadband, the mobile connection, the capital, and the improvements we can make to resilience through cyber security, which we know is a massive risk for businesses. So could be killing 3 birds with 1 stone there, maybe, on that agenda.
That's a really good point. And of course, as you said, the LEP has invested in the University of Wolverhampton's Cyber Security Centre down in Hereford. But its cyber security is absolutely crucial for all businesses. I'm going to move us on. Oh, Holly, go on very quickly. Hi.
Very, very quickly, I should have mentioned the University of Wolverhampton have recently just launched their Solved scheme, which is designed for businesses who are trying to go through that digital transformation and introducing them to 5G, robotics, automation, all those Internet of Things. So get in touch with them or let us know and we'll point you in the right direction. It's called the Solved project.
Thanks very much, Holly. And the University of Wolverhampton are one of our further higher education partners for the Marches. So absolutely. And we are blessed that we've got some really innovative organisations. I can see you waving, Richard, but we've got 5 minutes and I want to ask one last question. So this is poor chairing from me, absolutely. We've talked a lot about the challenges, but what are the opportunities that recovery from COVID-19 is bringing us? So what do you think the greatest potential for growth, where does that lie in the next 12 months? Is it around the use of e-commerce to develop new markets? And I mean, I'm just thinking there is a new digital food delivery service that has grown exponentially over the last few months in the Northern Marches and into Wales. That wouldn't have been possible before the COVID pandemic. So what is it? What are the opportunities? I'm seeing invest in technology, but what are the opportunities that this actually gives us? Go on, Richard, you're dying to say something.
No, yeah, I've got to go back to the fitness point very quickly. There is a funded training package delivered into the Marches area by a company called DTS. I'm unsure what they're doing around digital skills, but if we could find out, it'd be really helpful, because if there's a real need, as we've all identified today, then they should be focusing on delivering that, and I don't know whether they are. On opportunities, there is a vast number of opportunities, of course. With every challenge, there's an opportunity. One of the key ones that we will need to be focusing on when we know how to deal with it is export. You know, the products and services of the UK are desired around the world. We're facing challenges at the moment with the transition negotiations, but there's a massive amount of support. I've now got 6 people in the chamber directly working on supporting international trade and outward facing, one in partnership with the LEP, which I'm very grateful for that, because it's really adding value to the food and drink sector, but also 3 documentation people. So there's 9 of us already there to support international trade. International trade is a massive opportunity. It's a big world and people are buying stuff.
Thanks, Richard. And we've got all the way through this without the B word coming up. Liz, come in. We've got two minutes really, and then I've got a video to wind up. So come on.
I'll speak fast. Just to reiterate what Richard was saying, basically, we work really well with Richard's team on the international trade advisors, and many businesses we've signposted through to them. And I think it's going to be so key over the next couple of months when we come out of the EU that we need to use their team more and more. So it's a big up to the partnership that we have with the Chamber on that, and also to all the other partnerships. It's just such a great LEP to be part of. We work so well together.
You are my new bestest friend. Thank you for those lovely. We know there's an awful lot to do, and I said we've got through. There are some great opportunities that people are putting in the chat box. So all of that is being collated, and it will be really, really useful. So you'll see what people think. They really do think the biggest opportunity is the increased use of e-com markets. I'm going to just very quickly, if you could just put some comments about how you think Brexit is going to impact on your businesses. We're right, everything's going down to the wire now. We've already heard from Richard from the Shropshire Chamber about what is being done in the Northern Marches. I'm going to come to Sharon in the Southern Marches, so Sharon from Hereford and Worcester Chamber, and then I'm going to wind it up. So Sharon, I think I'm going to be giving you the last word. And you're on mute.
Sorry, I was going to echo Richard's thoughts. Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Hello?
Okay, so, hi Sharon.
I was going to echo Richard's thoughts about international. Recently, the advisors that we're working with, the government have put 64 new advisors into the country. It's definitely one of the ways that they see us helping to come out of this. If I've got the last word, what I want to say is consumer confidence. That's what we all need to champion. That's what we all need to support. and to also lobby for not going into any kind of a lockdown. If it's necessary, yes. If it's not necessary, no, because consumer confidence is going to be king.
Thanks for that, Sharon. And it's a point that's actually echoed in many of the comments in the chat around bringing increased footfall to high streets, maybe that change in towns and cities where we have more residential development, less offices, reinvigorate our town centres. There is real opportunity, but the Brexit is a big risk. And yeah, Matthew's saying Brexit's going to damage supply chains and cause price increases. Let's be positive and say that it will give us an opportunity. And if we work as a partnership, if we work collaboratively across the Marches and the wider Midlands, we will see our way through this. I need to thank you all for your contribution, panelists. Thank you. If I didn't get to you enough, I apologise, but I really appreciate your time. And to all of you who have put up with us for the last hour and a half, joined us through this, it's just been a real privilege, particularly to see all your comments. We will be capturing them all. Sean, I agree with you in your comments, and I don't always say that to you, but I've really appreciated everybody's issues. Thank you so much. Before you go, we've got something just quickly to show you. Take care, and I think it's over to you, Be Bold, and the LEP team.